Namaste, Galactic Family. Welcome back to my channel, Indigo Angel. Welcome if you're new, and don't forget to hit the notifications bell if you'd like to continue to receive my messages. And as always, thank you for your continued love and support of my channel. Everyone that continues to support my work is immensely appreciated. So thank you to those of you who appreciate my expression and interpretations. So today I asked the question, was Tupac Shakur the reincarnation of Niccolo Machiavelli? Okay, so Tupac, as many of you might know about him from his music, he lived an extremely controversial life. He had been shot 5 times. He served time in prison. He was served charges of rape, but never convicted. He served time in prison, which it was in prison when he initially read Niccolo Machiavelli's literature, The Prince. And he even stated himself that when he finds men who he thought were great, no matter what time in history, he would study them until he no longer thought that they were great. So it was clear Niccolo Machiavelli was a great role model and inspiration to Tupac, to the point that he created an entire album named after this inspirational connection. He also has a song, Hail Mary. The first word in that song is Machiavelli. And he often would just say Machiavelli in some of his music. When Tupac was in prison, he also read The Art of War by Sun Tzu. So it does show by the literature that he turned to what his spirit was processing as a soul. He, during the course of his entire rise to power and fame and money and fame, all of that, he felt attacked. He felt like he was fighting a spiritual warfare. His soul sought comfort in the ideologies that could give him some ground to interpret what he felt he was up against. So some of his favorite quotes were, "I'm not a threat to you unless you're a threat to me." He'd say, "Death is not the greatest loss in life. The greatest loss is what dies inside while we're still alive, so never surrender." And he also said, "A coward dies 1,000 times, but a soldier dies but once." In many of his expressions, in many ways, he was foreshadowing his death. So some even wonder if he internalized Niccolo's advice in the Prince literature, where he advocates for faking your own death to fool your enemies. So Tupac very deeply internalized the literature. He chose to read it. It became his destiny in many ways, particularly surrounding the controversy of his death. He was murdered by gunshot. Many of you know the story, but also after the fact, many cannot accept that he had passed. So believing that he did in fact fake his death and moved to Cuba. You know, even Niccolo Machiavelli had an immense amount of controversy that also surrounded his death. Upon his death, the Catholic Church withheld the literature from the public of all of his writings for 5 years because they didn't want the information in the literature exposed. But Tupac overall made very successful, music for the record label Death Row. Many of you know his music, California Love, Baby Don't Cry. Overall, he was an activist, and he used every opportunity where he was allowed to speak publicly to advocate for those struggling in the ghetto. Just overall, he vouched for the people that were not privileged, and he seemed to speak for all colors and creeds, not just his own. He spoke out for everyone who was struggling, and he very much held this resistance and opposition of defense because he always felt like he was under attack. He had a sense like a Malcolm X of his time, and Tupac himself believed in his future that he would become a political leader. If you'd like to learn more about this in depth and to see the footage that I have watched to understand aspects of his empathic body, please see the video I have in the description called Tupac Becoming Machiavelli. It's a 7-day theory documentary. It's really, really good. If you're not a fan of rap music, that's okay. You don't have to be a fan of rap music to just get the overall, picture or overall depth of the overall viewpoint of like the tragedy of someone's life, also the mission of someone's life, and also what these energy signatures, how they impact culture overall, things of that nature. You're literally just watching it to be able to gain the overall spectrum or overall idea. So you don't have to like rap music to watch this. What you want to get from it is just the overall character and his overall mission on Earth as a starseed and also as a human. And so watch this video, the link's in the description, and particularly some of the best raw footage of him is in the second half of the video. Now, I wasn't going to focus on Tupac initially because I was initially guided to work with Niccolo Machiavelli and his literatures, The Prince and the Discourses, as I was searching for the mechanics of ideology, and his literature kept presenting. But it became overwhelmingly clear how much their energy signatures were intertwined, Niccolo Machiavelli and Tupac Shakur. So I thought I'd highlight it here in this video. I did find some comparableness from both charts that could allude to a possible reincarnation. But overall, I do not think that Tupac was the reincarnation. But I do have a detailed explanation of what I do feel did happen. So I have pulled both charts here. I have Niccolo Machiavelli, born May 3rd, 1469 at 11:07 p.m. in Florence, Italy. And I have Tupac Shakur, born June 16th, 1971 in East Harlem, Manhattan, New York. And you will see I have no time for Tupac. So we are missing the rising and the ascendant in his chart, and we're going to kind of reflect on both and where these similarities maybe could express why Tupac was so enthralled with Machiavelli's perceptions. All of this is kind of coming up more and more because more spiritual warfare is revealed to me, especially during this time of the year where we're very close to the metagalactic core. And we have Pleiades and Uranus just basically going to be activating all through 2020. It's bringing up a huge purification from fifth density, from the heart chakra. So I do begin to see this fight over falsifying ideas and ideological battles, that the battles of the mind and truth trump the battles of power, even though ideas of power are just as sneaky as the ego transforming itself in the higher dimensions, or are at least the underlying equations that give the ultimate probability of human reaction and behavior over the thought, right? So for me personally, everything that I speak of is hopefully delivered in a sense where one can identify in me that I am not ever viewing anything from a position of the only truth, or even as which I speak it is not a representation of my identity. Right? Because when I'm delivering this, I don't even see this as my identity. I'm observing myself delivering the information from the most expanded state of observation I can possibly retract to, because I want to ultimately deliver from wholeness, right? But human expression is so limited and judgment is so transparent. Meaning that all reflection or all vibration within which one holds is therefore what they see. So, I cannot retract statement to mold to each one of those perceptions. So what I mean is I ultimately don't see myself as an identity, but simply just a temple that information flows through. I try to define a sense of intellect and all possibility of idealism and theoretical alternativity, Okay, so simply put, what I speak today doesn't represent my personal viewpoints. It's really important for me to say this today because of the position in which the viewpoints The Prince was written. Okay, so simply I'm presenting the expression and the existential thought. Okay, so if you don't know who Niccolo Machiavelli is, you may want to stay tuned some more, because as someone who's into galactic human history, galactic cosmic history, or anything starseed, his observational consciousness of his time does serve the Mintaka Library of the United Council very, very well. The Mintaka Council, representing the place where all nations lay down their swords and bring information to the peace treaties, including all negative ET agendas, therefore formations of those expressions through humankind. Everything is brought to Mintaka. Mintaka is just like a vast library of knowledge. There is no discrimination upon the knowledge. It just simply is. Niccolo Machiavelli was a political theorist with pragmatic views of rulership that escaped an illusion of idealism. He in-depthly highlights the conflict within moral codes and describes tactics that allow one the ability to gain power, often through deception and emotional manipulation. He wrote a book called The Prince in 1535 after studying the deepest aspects of the supreme reptilian family called the Borgias. The Borgias became prominent in political affairs in the 15th and 16th centuries, so this was in the time of the Renaissance, also at the end of the Dark Ages. They produced 2 popes of the same bloodline, which was very rare. Alphonse de Borgia, who ruled as Pope Calixtus III during 1455 through 1458, and Rodrigo Lanzal Borgia as Pope Alexander VI during 1492 and 1503. This is considered the toughest lineage of reptilian families to have existed on Earth. This family ruled on the reign of terror, sided to the rule of fear, and acted in criminal virtue and brutality, marking the end eras of the Dark Ages and Renaissance. This is the family lineage most known for incest, poisoning, grotesque public execution, beheading, prostitution, and also burning people alive, as they were the family that executed the order to burn Joan of Arc alive, the woman who was guided by Archangel Michael to head into battle and fight for her country. And she essentially revived a country. But they captured her and they set her, put her through a large trial, and then ultimately burned her alive in a public execution. So Niccolo Machiavelli studied the family's rule from an observational viewpoint after becoming a failed politician, and he was also imprisoned as well. But ultimately what he did is he delivered the reptilian lineage a very powerful piece of literature, looking at the world as it is and not as it should be, providing pragmatic political solutions, blurring the lines between morally right and morally wrong. He goes into an in-depth explanations of the inner psyche of the people versus authority figures and the people's dependency on their leaders. He essentially exposes the reality of the human race and expresses the qualities necessary to rule, at least at this time in culture. A very dark time in culture, right? But it's also placed in comparison to a Christed belief of morality or even commandments that one should follow. So this is like stating that commandments are kind of thrown out the window when it comes to rulership. He states the first job of authority figures is to safeguard the state, not the people, and that the majority of people are ungrateful and are not ready to act maturely upon hearing the truth, and that leaders should learn to play Jekyll and Hyde, delivering the favorable, delusional, comforting lie instead of the harsh truth. Now, this in no way represents my personal opinion on this matter, okay? This is simply an interpretation of the overall vibration of the literature The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli, for he was a brutal cultural philosopher. So when you hear the word Machiavelli, one will typically think of the dark triad, the narcissist, and strongman politics. Many think of Niccolo Machiavelli not as a hero, but as a realist serving political inspiration, as most political leaders to this day have read The Prince, including Trump and several other political leaders. It's almost like this unspoken thing that if you're a political leader, you have read this literature. So like I said, Tupac Shakur read it when he was in prison, and it did push him to adopt the name and the identity, and ultimately he produced an entire record after that connection that he had to the literature. Hence the idea that he could potentially be the reincarnation of Machiavelli. All of this energy has been coming to me the day that Trump was impeached. I feel it's all very synchronistic and symbolic and important to identify that as a cosmic influence of identity. So if you look at Niccolo's chart, he was transmitting from Aldebaran in his sun position at Taurus 2155. I also took note that the Borgia family crest is represented by the bull because Aldebaran is the eye of the bull. Okay, it's considered the diamond Buddha eye. And it's interesting that the Borgia family crest is represented by the bull, right? Because Aldebaran is supposed to be considered one of the primal light rays. This is the star of Archangel Michael. And then here we have this Borgia family who basically use that symbolism as their family crest. So I just wanted to notate that because as I look deeper into the energetic encryption, I've been tying more connections into the infiltration of the reptilian and draconian lineages deeper into the 4 royal stars. And that's just a side note. So put a pin in that. I'll come back to it later. It kind of ties into a video that I did called The Origin of the Feline Race, which I'm thinking about looking over some of this new information and kind of creating another video, but that's if I get to that. So, after pulling Machiavelli's birth chart, it's clear he was destined to bring forth a mental platform or a science of ideology that often gets denied or overlooked. His higher knowing was a collaboration of several star systems contributing to the cold, hard realities. Betelgeuse in his Mercury and Fomalhaut in his North Node would create an accelerated momentum of serving duality in the subconscious spectrum and his quest to push it to the surface. Lyra in his rising would keep him seeking the purity of it all inside, but possibly getting lost in all of it, having so many many markers of the royal fixed stars and powerful planetary positions. But overall, his chart is pretty balanced with a lot of higher angelic nations in his chart. He has Vega, Orion, Andromeda, Hydra, Pleiades, Arcturus. You can see here all of the degrees here on the left column, and then all of the origins in comparison on the right. Also Regulus in his south node. So he seems, pretty, dynamic or diverse in his cosmic identity expression, therefore giving him a more roundabout perception of a lot of these energies that he was interpreting or observing. Okay, so now I want to look at Tupac's chart in comparison. Okay, so in his sun, we have Gemini 2451, which is Alnilam, Orion. So his ultimate desire was peace. Alnilam sits within the string of pearls within Orion's belt, and that entire area of Orion is really about peace. As Mintaka is basically the capital of peace treaties and all United Nations, where all nations come to kind of deliver information. So his expression, his mythology is within that placement of the galaxy. But as you look down at his other placements, he has Mercury and Betelgeuse, he has Venus and Gamma Orion, Saturn and Gamma Orion, Neptune and Shala, opposition Gamma Orion. Gamma Orion is Bellatrix, and it's definitely a softer, more feminine natured aspect of Orion, but he is just stacked with Orion. He has 5 placements of Orion. So, when somebody has that many placements of Orion, they are going to come into this lifetime with a very hard existence that they have to basically kick and fight and scream through. Nothing's ever handed to them. They have to work very hard. They're exposed to the duality and the darkness of humankind very early in life. It's a part of their mythology. They are to be warriors. They are to rise up. They are to expose wickedness. And so they do take on a very, sometimes like Tupac very much did, a controversial life. And with having Alnilam and his sun and Betelgeuse and his Mercury, he was driven to be a loudmouth about that and not hide anything from anyone. He was very vocal and very outward with his expression of everything that was kind of as being perceived to him. Okay, so in comparison to the two charts here, what I want to take note of is these are both tropical charts as well. What I was just realizing, that I was just having a moment that I didn't think of to prepare for you guys, but if I had pulled sidereal placements for Tupac, that some of the placements might actually come very, very close to Niculo, but then we would be comparing sidereal to tropical. But these are both the tropical degree houses for both charts, and the main similarity would be they both have Mercury and Betelgeuse. I do see Betelgeuse within a range of influence, and they're definitely 10 degrees, almost 9. Well, they're 9 degrees apart. But that's about the closest I think that it gets as far as any type of similarity, except for when you come down to the north and south nodes. That's also, about a 7-degree difference, but Niculo has Aquarius 7 degrees, Leo 7 degrees, Fomalhaut and Regulus. It's within spectrum, right? I think if anything's within a 13-degree relativity, that there are spectrums of influence that interlap, intermerge, interconnect. So do I think there is some comparable synchronicities of both of their charts? I do, but I don't think it's enough to say that Tupac is the reincarnation of Niccolo Machiavelli. So what I do kind of think happened is that Tupac, he developed in the ideology and embodied the energy of Niccolo Machiavelli as his own and as his own destiny. He really internalized the book, the teachings. They both have Mercury and Betelgeuse, so there is no doubt that they thought alike, and would be why his literature appealed to Tupac in so much depth. Both energy encryptions did live a life of controversy and survival. They both had to fight just for their way in many ways. Both of them were actually imprisoned in their lifetime, so they both know what it's like to be imprisoned. But we have to remember, for one, I think we all have to be careful of this, and I'm guilty of doing this too, is that sometimes when we idolize others and we take on their characterizations and we embody their being, their essence, their identity, on many levels we also take on their karma and other probabilities that have extended from their work, right? You become an extension of them, and therefore you're almost working for their life mission or their life energetic encryption as you carry on that timeline. And so I think we have to be aware of how much of that we want to embody as we choose our teachers. And as we see people as inspirational beings that we want to be like, right? So I just wanted to say that. And so overall, I hope that you guys enjoyed this message today. And if you like this reading, you should get one for yourself or get one for somebody else. You can find me at indigoangel222.com, and or you can subscribe to my Patreon, patreon.com/indigoangel. And I hope you found this interesting today. And I have so much love for everyone. I'll see you on the next read.